Hello, my name is Oscar, and I'm making an MMO in Godot. It's a fun little hobby project I've been working on for the past few months, and I figured it's time to make a devlog about it. And because it's the first video, I'd love to start by making some introductions. My name is Oscar, and I go by NG Anderson in most places. I'm 32 years old, and by day I work as a programmer in the games industry, which I've done for about 8 years now. I started a company straight out of college back in 2017, which I ran as a CEO for a few years until the pandemic came. It was a great time, and I do miss the indie days a lot, but I really don't miss the financial insecurity. Since then, I've been at Paradox Interactive working on making DLCs for Crusader Kings 3 for about 5 years now. It's been an absolute blast, and I've learned so much from working in larger teams. I'm still working there, by the way. This MMO is a hobby project and will remain such for the foreseeable future. Why am I making an MMO? Well, there's two reasons, I guess. First one is my love of MMOs. Since I was a wee baby, I've been gaming, and the games I played the most have been MMOs. When I was a teenager, it felt like I was downloading a new MMO every month. Phantasy Star Online, RuneScape, Monster & Me, SMT Imagine, Ragnarok Online, Maple Story, Ren Online, World of Fantasy 14, MMO Online, for fun, Quest 2, Epic Quest, Rift, Terror, Age, Online, New World, Return of Liberty, Fairlight Online, Worm Online, Age of Conan, Spark Online, Ridiculous, What's Our Lost. I've played them all, and so many more. Let me know your favorite, by the way. Especially if it's a game called Face of Mankind, because goddamn, that game's amazing and way overlooked. It's a real shame that it had to shut down. Most recently, I've been stuck in the World of Warcraft swamp. I've been there for a few years. Mostly spending my time making add-ons, though. The second reason I'm making an MMO is because I think I can. It's a common misconception nowadays that MMOs are always insanely big projects and they take crazy amounts of money and manpower, and I don't think that's true anymore. There's a ton of smaller MMOs, and game development has never been easier. And even if I don't make it to the finish line, I'm sure I'll learn quite a lot of things. Okay, enough about me. What am I making? I'm calling it Compos Mentis. It's a third-person tab targeting game like World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy 14. It's made in Godot because I think it's a very neat engine that it's pleasant to work with. It's very fast to load up. Not much yet has been designed. I'm kind of winging it a bit, but I have one core pillar in mind so far. So I want to have some kind of rebirth or prestige system, whatever you want to call it, meaning that when you reach max level, you always go back to level 1 or similar. It's some kind of progression system that keeps you in the leveling loop, basically making leveling always relevant, and that the game doesn't start at max level, which is typically the case nowadays, I feel like, in most MMOs. And expansions can be made to flesh out content at any point, not just extending the level cap and making everything before it obsolete, which is the case with World of Warcraft. That's about it. There's some smaller design tidbits that have been discussed in my Discord, and I'm incredibly open to suggestions, feedback, and discussions there. Link to the Discord in the description. Okay, so I kind of undersold it a bit. I've actually done quite a bit of work, I feel, for the past few months. Let me show you. Okay, welcome to Compos Mentis. So I've started 2 game instances to show you that multiplayer works. There's an extremely basic character creator, and by that I mean you can select your name, and that's pretty much it. So if I make a character called Mr. Man, login, you can see that I already made a character called Mr. Dude. If I move around or do anything else that affects the game state on the server, that is automatically updated on other clients as well. Maybe I should talk a bit about how the server setup works. For that, I'm using something called SpacetimeDB, which in simple terms is a server which also is an in-memory relational database. That means that all server-side data is stored in SQL-like tables. I have a table with all my entities, a table for all their transforms, one for their combat stats, you get the idea. Every client then subscribes to updates to specific tables, which means the server will send them data whenever a row in that table is updated, inserted, or deleted, or modified in any way. If I'm a client who subscribed to the entity transform table and some entity's transform is updated, I will find out about it. Clients can't directly affect tables, but rather they call functions on the server, which in turn can decide to update tables. SpacetimeDB lets you write the server in a few languages, and I'm using Rust. I've never used Rust before, and I'm really loving it so far. Here's the function that clients call whenever they move their character around. It's not a great way of doing things, and I will probably rework this once I get physics and information about the world environment on the server, but it shows how the function interacts with tables. The function takes in an ID for an entity and a position that it's moved to. First, it checks that the given entity exists in the general entities table and that it's controlled by the person calling the function. If that's all correct, then we find it transforming the entity transforms table and update it to its new position. Another great thing about SpacetimeDB is that the tables aren't actually updated until the function is successfully completed. So if we were, for whatever reason, throw an error after we updated the entity transform, the transform wouldn't actually get updated. So no item duplication bugs by causing server functions to crash in the middle of them. Anyway, back to the game. So we have enemies that we can click on to target, and we have other players, but how do we interact with them? With skills, of course. Here's a very basic menu listing all your skills, which you can then drag to the hotbar. One thing I've implemented, which I think is pretty neat, is nested tooltips. This is based on an asset by Hugh Playfair that I've modified quite a bit to suit my needs. Huge props to that guy. Link in the description. I think it has a huge potential in an MMO like this. You can see that I'm using it to give a more detailed explanation of how skill works. But I could see it being used in other places, such as quest text as well. Imagine if an NPC mentions another character and you've completely forgotten who they are. It happens to me in WoW all the time. Just hover over their name and you get a brief description of them. Here we can see a skill that applies a condition on a target, which periodically damages them. Let's go over how skills work from a developer perspective. Here we see the resource for the fire attack skill we just saw in game. It has an icon and some animation variables that I'm not using yet. Every type of static data also has a name, which I will talk about later, and a dictionary for some extra information, though I haven't really found a use for that yet. Most importantly is this generic data. Everything in here is what the server also knows about this skill. The rest is client only, since the server doesn't need to know anything about icons or animations. Opening this up, you can see that we have a UUID, an array for on-cast effects, some optional variables for cast range, cast time, and cooldown, a bit flag for what targets are allowed, and another bit flag that I haven't found a use for yet. I also need to make an inspector plugin for these flags, since they're not something that Godot comes with, as far as I know, so right now I have to manually figure out the integer representation. The magic really happens in the on-cast. In here I decide what the skill actually does. For example, this one applies a condition. But I can also make it do some damage. For example, I can make this do 10 damage scaled by level times 5 physical damage. Or I can make it do some healing. Scales the same way, uses the same type of resource. Or ranged damage. This one has a minimum and a maximum, and scales each individually. I think this is a good segue to talk about conditions. Conditions are different types of persistent effects on an entity. This is the condition that is applied by the fire attack I just showed you. You can see it also has an icon, a name, and extra data. The generic data is different though. This one contains an array of modifiers and effect takers, as well as a duration, if it's stackable, as in multiple applications behave as one, and a bit flag that can be used to categorize it. For example, this condition is tied as both fire and debuff, meaning that in the future I can make a healing skill that remove any fire debuffs you currently have, for example. Static modifiers are very simply an enum saying what this modifies and a value. This one reduces fire resistance by 10. When I do damage calculations, I can then very easily check a target's modifiers and adjust damage accordingly. Static effect tickers are slightly more advanced. They are basically the same instant effects that I showed you for the fire skill, but repeatedly happening based on an interval for as long as the condition is active. This one deals 2 fire damage every second. So basically if you want a damage or healing over time effect on a target, you would apply an effect ticker. But it could also be used for other things that happen repeatedly. Aside from modifiers and effect tickers, there's 2 more types of effects I want conditions to have, which I haven't implemented yet. And those are procs and skill modifiers. A proc would be like an effect ticker in that it triggers a normal instant effect, but instead of being on an interval, it would have a chance to happen when a specific thing occurs. For example, you could have a buff that gives you a 50% chance to heal you whenever you deal damage. A skill modifier would be something that directly affects how a skill functions, like changing the fire skill to instead deal ice damage. Both procs and skill modifiers will hopefully be implemented before the next video. Okay, so I've made these resources, but how does the server get this information? Simple. I've made a plugin that connects to the server and sends the generic data in a server function, which the server then adds to tables. Oh, and by the way, I've also made enemy spawners that are sent to the server here, but that's not particularly interesting. Okay, that was a lot of talking. I'm gonna kill some enemies now. I'm gonna start with my basic attack. I've got a cast bar, you can see it on both screens. And then I use my fire attack to apply a dot, hopefully burning him to death within a few seconds. And he's gone. Also, I have a spawner, so he should respawn in 3 seconds. Very cool. The last thing I want to talk about in this video is my localization system. It uses the regular Godot translation system with some extra additions. Let's take the description for the fire attack as an example. It looks like this in my translation spreadsheet. Notice these @ symbols. It indicates that a specific object should be fetched and a function should be called on it if it exists. Here we add a tooltipable name for the dot condition. The getName with tooltip function looks like this. Not very readable, but if we replace the placeholders and unescape some things, it would look like this. This showcases 2 more aspects of the localization system. Whenever I translate this string, everything within $signs get recursively replaced and translated with another lock string. This URL bracket is what I use to indicate that a part of a text is tooltippable. I then have a specialized rich text label node, which handles the mouse over and actually spawns the tooltip. Everything within brackets is skipped when translation happens, because it's usually further translated later. For example, whatever's in the tooltip only gets translated when the tooltip actually gets shown. And that's all for this video. These videos won't be regularly scheduled, but rather come up when I have something new to show. So the next one will be about the leveling system and talent system, whenever they're done. Or if you'd like me to do a deep dive into anything else I've shown off, let me know, and I might be able to squeeze in another video. Thanks for watching, and if this was at all interesting to you, please follow, hit like, join the Discord, you know the drill. Bye. They'll never find out that I'm reading off a script the entire time. Whoa. Technology.